does is perfect. This made the king even more furious. Is that so? Tell me, if I throw you into the darkest dungeon right now, will you still say that God is great? The servant bowed his head and answered, If you do, I will say that it is simply God's plan for me. True to his word, upon returning to the palace, the angry king ordered his guards to throw the faithful servant into prison. A few weeks passed, and the king's hand healed. Wanting to put the incident behind him, he decided to go hunting in the forest once again, this time choosing a different servant to accompany him. Deep in the wilderness, disaster struck. The king and his new servant stumbled into the territory of a fierce tribal village. It was the season of their sacred festival, and the villagers were actively hunting for human sacrifices to offer to their deities. The king and his servant were swiftly captured, bound, and dragged to the village shrine. Right before the king's eyes, his new servant was slaughtered and offered to the gods. Next, the tribal priest pulled the king to the altar. But just as the high priest raised the sacrificial knife, he noticed the king's hand. He gasped and stopped the ritual. According to their laws, a sacrifice to the deities had to be completely whole and unblemished. Because the king was missing a finger, he was deemed unworthy and disqualified. The tribal villagers untied him and cast him out of their territory. Terrified and breathless, the king ran all the way back to his palace. The moment he arrived, he shouted for his guards, "Release my faithful servant from the prison immediately." When the servant was brought before the throne, the king embraced him and narrated everything that had happened in the forest. "My friend," the king said, weeping, "I see now that God is indeed great. My missing finger saved my life. But tell me, if God is so perfect, why did he allow me to unjustly throw you into a miserable prison for all these days?" The servant smiled and replied, "Your Majesty, if you had not put me in prison, I would have been the one accompanying you into the forest today. And since I have all my fingers, the tribesmen would have slaughtered and sacrificed me instead of your other servant. By allowing the animal to take your finger, God saved you. And by allowing you to lock me away, God saved me. Truly, everything God does is perfect." The king bowed his head, realizing the depth of his servant's wisdom, and thanked God for his missing finger and his prison walls. Moral of the story: we see only a fraction of the tapestry. God sees the whole picture. This story teaches us the virtue of patience and faith during difficult times. Often, when bad things happen to us, whether it is a painful loss, like the king's finger, or an unfair setback, like the servant's imprisonment, we react with anger and confusion. However, disappointments are frequently divine appointments, protecting us from a much worse fate. What looks like a tragedy today might be the very thing that saves your life tomorrow. Trust the process because everything happens for a reason.